Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept podcast, where we are breaking down unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Sometimes walls get knocked down, but they usually need to be built back up. And how we build them back up needs to be well thought out and designed in a way that they are going to last for years to come. Guest today, Jeremy Stam, architect extraordinaire from Buro47 Architecture here locally, and friend, father. How you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. No, thanks for taking some time out today to come and chat with us. We do, a lot of the podcasts that we've been doing. We go in so many different directions here, but there's a theme of construction, obviously, because that's some what we do that ends up landing on a couple of episodes. We just did an episode with a friend of mine, a tool rep, and it's for some of those construction nuts out there that love what new tools are looking like. But yeah, I'm excited to release that episode too when it comes out. But
cool, I'll have to listen to it for sure.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself here.
Well, present day, Jeremy, or where we're at currently, or where we're headed, where we came from, all the above.
I want to know Jeremy right now, and then I want to dive into how he become the Jeremy that he is today.
We can try that.
All right.
I guess right now, like you already alluded to it, I wouldn't say architect extraordinaire, but architect nonetheless, and local. So what that means specifically is I am a 50% owner in a small architecture practice in Ladner, just south of Vancouver. There's 9 of us in the office right now, so we're not the smallest firm, but we're by far the largest firm in the Lower Mainland. But that's a kind of a really sweet spot to be, honestly. Love the location. Being south of the Fraser comes with its own challenges and opportunities. I'm sure you've got lots of stories to share on that front as well. But it's a good home base where we're trying to do good architecture from. Basically, we're hyper local, like our whole staff, except for one person, lives in South Delta. We all understand this community, so do a lot of work here, but that's probably 2/3 of our work ends up being in Delta, and about 1/3 of it's elsewhere throughout the Lower Mainland. Maybe that's even a little high. Maybe it's like 50-50, 50% in Delta, 50% beyond. But
yeah, the thing, I have so much respect for architects. Anybody that has gone to a tremendous amount of school, because I come from a background of very little post-secondary education, and I hear the stories, and I follow on Instagram so many different accounts that have architecture memes that just I don't really understand them, but I know what they're alluding to is just a lot of the pains that go on in school, and like as first year architecture, what you get into, what you think it's going to be like versus what it actually is. So were you always interested in designing? In what kind of drew you to the idea of, man, I like being in school. I like design. What was it that drove you to really pursue that career?
I think I'd be lying if I said I was from day one, like little kid, super motivated to become an architect. But there were things like surrounding me in my life growing up, like lots of friends and family in construction, for one. Grew up all over the Lower Mainland, but a good chunk of that was actually in Chilliwack. So a smaller community, but a lot of what was happening there at the time was construction and expanding. And so I have a grandfather who was a draftsperson who kind of worked on the periphery of some of that construction activity. He had a lot of different things he did, to be honest. He was an entrepreneur, so kind of a little planting seeds of these ideas in my mind from a young age of like, you don't have to follow like a typical path. You can try lots of things, but he also always like really respected like craft and making. He had a huge metal shop that I loved to like hang out in. He'd show me how to like teach me how to weld and grind at like unreasonably young ages.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of that construction and making context growing up. Also in school, like grade school, I was always into the shop classes, into the art class, like the mixture of these things that like the cool and uncool kids would do. So
Yeah.
I was like both learning how to like work on cars. Like my school I was fortunate enough to have like an auto mechanics class, a wood shop, a metal shop, all of those. So got indoctrinated in the ways of making things, and then started working from a pretty young age too. I think I got my first like first full-time non-family job at 14, and then you know, a lot of what I did was manual labor, and then slowly morphing into construction as a framer. So when I got to the end of grade 12, it seemed like a pretty obvious like merging of all of these background experiences, architecture. It was either that, or I thought maybe there's a chance for me as an engineer, but math was fun, but not that fun. So architecture I think played to my strengths for sure. And then you asked some questions about like, well, what's it like going through the schooling process specific to architecture?
Yeah, I did want to make one quick comment before get into that, because you mentioned trade school, and just as like I went back because we've hired students locally from high schools here, and I went back to the high school that I graduated from in search of some new young blood, looking for some help, maybe kids that are coming out of school that are looking for an apprenticeship program. And when I was in school, there was all different trades, right? We had the auto shop, we had metal shop, we had electronics, we had drafting, we had woodworking, we had a construction class, and we had, 7 different teachers teaching different trades. And when I went back, it was down to 2.5 teachers.
There's something happening in there where it's I don't know if it's liability or something that they're worried about, or lack of interest. I'm not sure. I see we do get some high school students coming through the office asking for like volunteer positions and things as part of their career planning classes. And it sounds like they focus a lot. There is like drafting courses and Revit courses and like these different modeling softwares that are relevant to my industry, but not as much the shop stuff, not as much the hands-on stuff, which honestly, you couldn't, even if you wanted to go into architecture, you couldn't do something better than construction or like shop classes and things like that. At that age, like whether you learn a piece of software or not is kind of not the point. You can pick anybody. Gen Z can pick up software in an instant, so it's like irrelevant to almost that they're learning it in high school.
I think it's almost because it was cool to take those classes, but a lot of the students that were in there were kind of like me. They liked working with their hands. They weren't interested in really anything else. Plus, it was just like a fun, it was a good place to learn some stuff and work with some tools and hang out with some good people. But it was, and then it really, really dropped off over the last 15 years. But I think, and I'm hopeful, that it's becoming cool again, and there's more and more interest in that type of thing. So if I go around and I speak at different high schools with different high school programs, and I am really trying to make trades cool again, because
I think it will happen, because you were living in a world where a lot of the other stuff that people wanted to do is like getting AI'd away, or like changed by AI, like in a way that will never put that toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak. So trades are the last thing to go, honestly. And I think definitely there's a place for I follow a motorcycle podcast where one of the people they feature on there quite a bit is trying to bring shop class back to schools in the US. And the stories they have, it's like kids don't even know they want it, and then they show up and start like letting them work on a bike, and it's like, it doesn't matter, like boys, girls, whomever, they're all so into it. And then he's just really pushing those school districts there to try to bring more of it back.
Yes, there was nothing cooler than like working on a car engine. I mean, now you don't like I wouldn't even work on my own vehicle because it's not even an engine anymore. There's so many parts. The whole thing is a computer. But there was nothing cooler than working on an engine that wouldn't start that first time that like you get all the pieces in the right place and you fire it up and it turns and you just like start cheering.
I almost had that experience, except that mine never started. So we had to I think they were ancient, like Ford Pinto engines or something, like little 4-cylinders that we had to strip them all apart, clean every part, catalog everything, put it all back together. And it was in pairs, and me and my buddy couldn't get it going for nothing. So Still graduated.
Still did all right. You didn't. Yeah, that wasn't a defining factor.
No, maybe it steered me away from being a wrench and towards being a pencil or something.
Yeah. Either way, I do. I really believe that it's coming back, and also it makes for good TikTok videos. So kids are stoked on it these days. Like they're loving getting out there. The problem is they spend more time on their phone than they do on the tools. So it's more of nice to be out there versus actually get it done thing. But I also see so many, like we have so much AI going on, so many software programs, so many apps that are trying to make everybody's life better, easier, faster. But it's also very, very noisy in the way that there's just so much clutter, and it's drawing us away so much from our surroundings and just doing any sort of physical work or labor. And we get addicted to the phone. We get addicted to what we're watching, and we forget about how cool it is to actually build stuff with our hands. And we're seeing less and less people that were interested in this for a long time. And now it's sort of really opened up a lot of opportunity here, because I think the pendulum has swung so far in one direction that now people are kind of burnt out by their phones and what's going on. And it's like it's tough to be a YouTube influencer as much as just people want to do it.
Right.
It's really tough to do that.
Flooded market.
So people are like, you know what? Maybe I'm just gonna go work with my hands and make a lot of money that way and be pretty happy with that. I think
people don't. You mentioned getting burnt out, but you don't have a time for a clear thought. Some people at this point, right? I fall into the same pattern sometimes of just the easy stimulation on your devices versus sitting down with your own thoughts and having some moments to think clearly, deliberately about things. If you just keep plugging a screen back in, you kind of miss those opportunities, and a lot of that can really set you up for success. Being able to step back and I don't know if I'd say meditate necessarily, but actually maybe not that, but to be able to think deliberately and clearly about next steps and where are you headed and what should you do next. And so I think that coupled with it's great to do things with your hands, and there's some meditative quality of working with your hands, honestly. So kind of putting these two pieces together can kind of create more of a full person than just being on social media. And then I guess part of the pendulum swinging that we see in the architectural industry as well is just the generations that are moving through as well. So I think there was the boomers don't need any more hate. They get a lot of hate already, but they kind of camped out for a lot longer than some people expected in construction and in architecture and engineering, whatever. And so there was kind of this middle group, the older Gen X, older millennials, younger Gen Xers that were kind of kept getting held back and kind of got to these middle roles, but didn't get to keep progressing as quickly as maybe they wanted to. And now when boomers are stepping out finally and retiring, there is a vacancy getting created. And I mean, I talked to trades on job sites that they talk about the problem of losing all the masters, so to speak, because in the meantime, those people that are now retiring lost the people that they would have trained up to take over, just ended up going different directions because they're there's never going to be something for me here. So either maybe they went and started their own thing, but a lot of times the knowledge didn't transfer very effectively to the younger generation. So there is this vacuum, there is this place for hands-on training and bringing people into these professions now, where there's going to be a need for sure to fill these spots.
Yeah, and somebody can be really great at something, but if they don't have the ability to pass that knowledge down, then that knowledge is going to die with them, and they will just be noticed.
Totally.
Hey, this guy was really great, but he he or she didn't have that opportunity to really pass down that knowledge. So that has a very finite time span.
Totally.
And I remember when I was working right out of high school, I was set up with this journeyman carpenter when I was working for a large commercial construction company here, and he didn't talk to me, like no joke. At first, the only thing that he said to me was all very, very negative stuff. I was there. I was, for lack of a better term, I was his bitch. That's what I was there to be. And there was a period where we worked side by side each other, and he didn't say, we're not, like, I'm not joking, more than 3 or 4 words a day top, because he wanted me to just read his mind and do this. And anytime I messed something up, he would get mad rather than direct me and showing me what to do and having that, like, that was his way of doing it. It is not the right way, but he very much wanted to keep his skills to himself. He had no interest in sharing those skills. He was quite good at what he did, but he knew, as much as I was there to learn, he had zero interest in teaching me. And that was a shame, because like, some people are very, very talented, but if they can't share their knowledge that they have, then it becomes a dying art form.
Well, it's so true. And even when you want to be deliberate about passing on the knowledge, it's not easy, right? Being a good mentor is tough. And like, we hire young people directly out of school constantly, or not constantly, as much as you can with 9 people. But there's, people come in, they learn a bit, and they move on. And just the mentorship side of passing on what you know to them while you're simultaneously trying to get work done and try to manage some business end aspects of owning a company is tough. And that's when you're trying to do a good job. And so if you have unfortunate situations like this where you're not even like somebody's not even trying, that's tough. I think you could still learn from them probably, but you might just get the job might just become a paycheck at some point, because you're like, well, I'm here to make money now, and I'm obviously not going to grow a whole lot, and you start looking elsewhere, right? So I think it's really short-sighted on the part of anybody who's not an open and willing mentor trying to share what they know and to bring up the next generation.
Yeah, especially if you're a business owner, it's your duty, because you're building this place for people to come and grow their careers, and they're not going to just walk into your organization and grow themselves without some sort of mentorship and leadership that needs to be in place. So it has to be an environment that they're going to go to, that they feel that they're going to continue to grow. And you, as the leader of the organization, needs to be able to, one, cast a vision big enough so that their visions can all fit within that. Otherwise, at some point, they will try and look for work elsewhere, or look for somewhere else where they can fulfill those visions. But also coach them along the way and check in and make sure that they're on their way to hitting their goals and really being able to live out that vision and passing along your knowledge. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, because taking the time out and to be present but set very clear goals with staff, and where not only like the direction of the company is going, and get granular on some of the metrics that maybe need to be hit just to measure performance, but also on the personal level, because we're in a world where everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants to have
they just need to.
It's to.
So expensive out there.
They
right?
need to. Like, they need. Living's expensive. Vehicles are expensive, and we're in a place like housing. Yes, housing is expensive for sure, but also our monthly costs, and just our everybody has a $1,700 cell phone in their pocket, and they're paying these OTT companies, whether it's going to be Netflix, YouTube Premium, Spotify, like they have a ton of these subscriptions that just weren't available at when our parents were grown up in a very, very different generation. So just like the overall cost of living has gotten very, very expensive for a lot of people. And they need to know that there's an opportunity there to become fairly financially independent themselves.
A path they could follow to get to a place they would want to be getting to. And so I maybe throw a question your way is, like, what are you guys doing to try, like, I'll step back first before the question. So I find it's tough and to get with the granular metrics, the performance where you can quantifiably say, like, here's what you need to do and how to get there, or how to measure that you're being successful or not. How do you do that in your company? I find it extremely difficult. So much is qualitative, and we have check-ins, we talk to people, but it's very it's very soft. It's like a soft skill, and it's hard to find a way to put it into numbers if this is being successful or not, and then put a kind of quantitative roadmap in front of people. So what does Neighbourhoods do?
Yeah. So the soft skills, I'll say this: the soft skills, and I don't know why they're called soft skills, because I think that they are very hard. A lot of them very hard skills to learn.
Yeah, difficult skills that you can't easily put numbers to.
Yeah,
so soft as a not numbered.
What I'm talking about is not only IQ but EQ, making sure there's understanding, empathy, being able to have difficult conversations when they need to be provide candor and critical feedback when feedback needs to be had. So yeah, I mean, like on our end, it's been ever evolving, but I live by the phrase is be the lighthouse, not the tugboat, right? So I'm there to provide information. I will be able to live my life as best as a leader and a mentor, maybe a father figure to my daughter, right? A friend. I will be the best version of myself that I possibly can be. And that starts to radiate, right? And I just find that if you are the best version of yourself, I'll give you an example. Health and fitness is something that's quite important to me. I've talked about a fair bit on the podcast here with different guests as well. But when our office here where we are is, there's a McDonald's right down the street. There's pizza on every corner. And if I was bringing in pizza and McDonald's to work every day, then it's going to be likely that becomes the standard. And so that becomes okay. But as soon as I start bringing in my own lunch, start being louder about that, start saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Yes, I worked out today, and I talk about the exercise that I got. All of a sudden, people start understanding what is valuable to you. So then they start showcasing those things that they feel are also going to be valuable, that you're going to understand.
We're social creatures, right? And you like to fit into that pack. And if your pack leader, so to speak, is showing positive traits, I'm sure it wears off on people in a positive way.
Yeah,
culture too, right? Company culture then becomes totally, yeah.
Yeah, and that radiates. So when you talk about culture, that's that it's really up to the leader in that organization to start there. Tactically, there was a gentleman named Cameron Harold. And we've talked about him a few times. He was the past COO, or the original COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and he was with Brian Scudamore, the founder of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, until they basically built it to $100 million, and then they stepped away because they realized, hey, we need somebody else in place to take it past $100 million. And he wrote a book called Vivid Vision. And Vivid Vision is it highlights the importance of having crystal clear clarity and crystal clear understanding of what the vision is for the company. So you write that out, and it can be one page, 6 pages, 10 pages, but the idea is to get very, very clear, and so you can live, breathe, taste, see, feel what that is and what that vision looks like. And that vision needs to be cast to the organization. So I wrote our 5-year vivid vision. I wrote kind of the mission statement for the company, and I wrote a 5-year mission statement. So it came out, and it was, this is what the company looks like in 5 years. So you have like, this is the size of the office. This is what we're doing. This is what our customers are saying about us. This is what the media is saying about us. This is what our family is saying about our choices in the career. This is, and like literally having phrases and comments that are like being made to the point where you almost have a friend, and he had drawn up a full newspaper article, just had somebody made it on Canva where it like showed him as like, oh, or this novelist of here. And so there's an aspect of that. But then behind it, it had really tangible benchmarks. So financial metrics that we could balance and just make sure that we're on track. Where it showed, year one, this is going to be the revenue target. This is going to be gross profit target. This is going to be our customer experience rate. This is, the feedback that we're going to be getting from our customers, because if we're not giving good feedback to our customers or getting good feedback from our customers, then it means that we're not doing our job. And that's what we're here to ultimately do, is service the people that pay us money to provide them with the best service possible. So all of these metrics, and then we measure them and we review them every single week at a Monday meeting. So we have weekly meetings. So it shows, hey, this is how many how many leads have come in, how many new projects have we signed, how much has been invoiced. We review any new customer reviews that have been come in and our average score. And if it's anything that's straying from our goal, or we see something kind of tailoring off, then we have a conversation about that as a team. Mm-hmm. It's not one person directing and saying, hey, this has to be done. It's no, as a team, where are we, where can we improve? And so building that out, that vision out, did not come entirely from me. That came from speaking with all of our staff, or the people that I felt were going to be playing a role in making that happen, and getting feedback from them on what it is that they wanted and where they set it. And so that vision that was built out had every single one of those people in mind, and the roles that they were going to be able to grow into to fulfill that opportunity.
Yeah, love it. I think it's hitting a lot of good points, right? Because now you're getting these people who you want to stay with you, be with you on this journey, to kind of feel like they can see themselves in it, in the plan, in the like big master plan, so to speak, and it gives you that document to check back in with, and every day, maybe not every micro action, but like every week, let's say, maybe are these things moving you towards or away from, or just horizontal relative to those goals? So like you say, if it's tapering off, or if, like, hey, is this new avenue we're kind of seem to be going down, is it actually helping us get to where we want to get? And maybe sometimes you end up revising, because you can't at the outset of that when you put that vivid vision together, maybe something else emerges out of the mist that you had no idea what could be like a good evolution of your goals. But I like that there's something there.
This is best case scenario is sort of where you're starting at, and here's the end zone. But that it's going to over the course, because we're in an industry and in a world that things move and change so much at a rapid pace, that it has to be, as sort of corny as it sounds, it has to be about the journey of that, getting there. And it is not a straight line. It is ups and downs and lefts and rights. And it is full of difficult conversations that need to be had, because if you figure out that, hey, this is actually sort of the wrong path that we've gone on, then that's really up to you as the leader of the organization to own that and say, yes, like I take responsibility for that. It was the wrong decision. What are we going to do about it and correct that? But it is difficult, because team members, they do get burnt out. And the thing is we are all human beings, right? We're not AI generated. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have family members that, whether it's like you're a father, I'm a father, our wives get pregnant, we want to take some time off, kids get sick, they need to, be taken to school, they need to, people get into arguments with their spouses or they get injured. And so like we are human beings. And so when it comes down to it, it's just like, I just want to be the best human being that I can be to all the human beings that are playing an impact in my life. But yeah, I mean, we're talking entrepreneurship. Like it doesn't come without punches in the face and constant low level anxiety of like, there's always stuff that is going to be lingering. So it's definitely easier said than done.
And I think what's unique from where I sit is in architecture compared to maybe construction a little bit is there's almost this mode of pretending that you don't care about being successful from a business perspective, even though that's like such a reality to meet all those needs, human needs you're talking about. Is like, a pure architect wouldn't want to admit that they want to be wealthy or, achieve financial success, because that should be so secondary below the art of architecture. So I think it also is something that makes us a bit uncomfortable maybe with an aspect of that vivid vision idea where it's like, hey, this is about success financially too. What of course it has to be, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's just a kind of a architectural cultural mindset that needs to be fixed. And thinking about the people in your organization, what they need to see success, both in their like non-work lives and work lives. How does being realistic about the fact that we live in a capitalist society, and love it or hate it, it's a pretty bad strategy to not care about profit if you're running an organization, because those jobs that people depend on won't be there if the organization doesn't stay profitable. So I think I like the idea, the vivid vision idea. And I think we, at my company, we definitely talk about what that thing is. And it's very casual, but I could probably use a little more rigor.
I'll after this, I'll show you all the graphics that we have and we built out and ran through that. But it's also like it's funny because you look at artists, right? And you look at artists, and that's the idea is of the art. I don't care if like the painters there that are there, like, yeah, it's better to be suffering and painful.
Better than a suffering artist. Better to be a suffering artist than a sellout, right? Because then are you really an artist anymore? You've sold out. You've made money.
But it's like you look at other artists. Like I'm talking like rap artists, right?
Sure, yeah.
What are they doing? They're out there. They're like, I'm the best. I'm gonna make a boatload of money. This is what I'm doing. Like, this is what's important. I'm here. And they talk about the art, but they know like they are there to make money. And if you're hiring a doctor, like, that's coming in, is going to operate on your knee or your brain or your shoulder, or if you're an athlete and you're looking and you're a high level athlete in the NFL and you're looking to hire on a doctor because you're putting your trust in their hands, are you going to want to hire the doctor that's cruising around in the Mazda CX? Or are you going to be like, no, man, I want the guy that makes that makes really good money enough to drive around in the Ferrari that's going to show up here because I want that guy that's going to be really helping out.
The architecture version of that is maybe it amongst your peers, you wouldn't want to look like you're that's where the suffering artist thing matters more than but when it comes to your clients, right? Definitely there's a lot of signaling around like, what's your office space like if you show up to a job site in that like clapped out Mazda, that's sending a different message than your brand new Polestar or whatever, right? Like it's definitely a thing across all these industries, right? Projecting success to get success, that kind of thing. And do you really want that lawyer that can't seem to pay their rent? Of course not, right? There's something about seeing in a professional setting, especially like seeing that person has other people trust this person with their money clearly. So maybe I should too. So that suffering artist and like penniless, don't care about making a profit over the art is maybe more an idea that's internal to the architectural industry. Like it's established in school for sure, in architectural school, where you can't make money at what you're doing, and the way that school projects function are inherently terrible from if you would try to do the practice of architecture in an academic way, in a like real world scenario, you'd have a tough time at it, and you'd probably rely heavily on like PhD students or something working for free.
And this is, this is the same thing, like, and I shouldn't say it in all industries, but I know for, for my own industry, if I'm pulling up to meet with a customer, kind of just like what they're expecting is, hey, we're, pull up in an F-150, couple of years old. This is it. But if I'm showing up in a Porsche or a Maybach of some, whatever, they're going to be like, oh man, this guy charges way too much money. And so you kind of like have to, if you drive, I've seen videos on YouTube of, they're just contractors that are, park around the corner up the road and then walk up, and they get out of their clothes that they're doing and put on something a little dirty just so it makes it kind of look more like the part. But it's so ridiculous.
But I've heard the other direction too. Like I can't remember. I hope it's not you that I was talking to, but some other contractor, I think locally, was saying that they didn't actually want to be driving that pickup truck, but they bought a pickup truck just to show up in the like as expected vehicle to new client interviews, and they actually would rather they have like a van, which they find is nearly as much cargo space and covered, and they're like, but if they show up in their Dodge Caravan, no matter how clean it is, no matter how great the graphics and branding, they're not going to get the job. So they literally have a F-150 for initial meetings, and then they ditch that thing and their Dodge Caravans for the rest of the time.
Yeah, it is absolutely insane. These mind games that we start playing, and this persona that we have to get off. It's just, you just be like, man, we offer an awesome service, but you need to let people know that, right? If you're the best in the world or the best in your city, people need to be made aware of that. I went to back to money though. I went to a high school about 2 weeks ago with a program that I've been working with for about the last 6 years. It's just working with groups of high school students, and what they do is they work throughout the course of the year. They develop a business that they're going to pitch to a panel of judges at the end of the year in a Shark Tank type scenario, and you're going to get feedback along the way as they build this business. So work with them about what does your competitive landscape look like? What is it? Is it a viable product? How are you going to do this? How are you going to make money? Like all these questions that investors are going to ask you. So that's what they're trying to set these students up to do, is like when you get out into the world, into entrepreneurship or running your own business, these are the things that you're going to need to think about. And I went in there and I asked all of these students, one of the first questions that I asked them, I said, who in here wants to make a lot of money? And there was 2 hands that kind of like half went up in the whole class. And I was like, okay. All right, well, who in here wants to make a significant impact of some sort in the world? And like 4 hands went up. And so we went through this conversation about why, and started asking them why, and they didn't really have a great answer, but they were all of them were almost embarrassed to put up their hands to say that they wanted money, because they had some sort of previous story that they've told themselves about money being evil, about
I'm so surprised by that, honestly.
Yeah, I was surprised.
I keep hearing which generation are we on now in high school? But I keep hearing like Gen Z is like they've just succumbed, or is that the right word? Not sure. Succumbed to the fact that the world's kind of screwed, and they might as well just get rich. Might as well enjoy life, because I'm not fixing the climate. I'm not fixing housing affordability. Let's just do what we can. Let's become traders.
Yeah. Let's just do whatever we can to
take a few vacations before heat death of the universe.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it. But where we got to after having conversations with all of these students and kind of asking what they wanted to do and what they were there for and diving a little bit deeper, I had said, after speaking to all of you, I know that all of you faces around here, if you had more money, all of you would be able to do great things at a level that you couldn't believe. And ask them, if you had more money, would you be doing greater things? And every single hand shot up. So what I was trying to do there with them is just open up a conversation, like whether you make a lot of money or not. I mean, everybody, like, money is a topic. It's not the be all end all. But what I was trying to say is with these students is kind of break them out of their shell a little bit, because all of them I know would be able to do better things. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you are going to be a business owner and you're going to hire people and you're going to want to offer them a career and build into people, like all of that stuff happens. All of that stuff is great, but it all comes on the back end of, if there is a business that is able to make money, then you're going to be able to provide a better future, because every single one of my staff at some point want to own their own house.
For sure.
You know what I mean? And so you want to be able to really fight for that. And that kind of comes back to the vision. Like, how can we fight for this? How can we be innovative to the point, like, you can only charge so much, but what can we do in the market? What can we do as a service that's going to allow for that? And that's what I'm trying to do. And how do you become the best version of yourself so that you can bring more and more value to the community, to the people that you service? And the more value that you can bring the world, the more opportunity there is to make money. And then you can, take that money, do whatever it is that you want. You can buy the Porsche and the Ferrari and the big house on the beach, all that stuff if you want. Or you can make significant donations to charities of your employees' choices. That maybe means a lot to them. You can help their kids get through school. You can provide them with more and more opportunity and, more vehicles and resources, and invest into them so that they have a great place to work. So it's people have a weird idea when it comes to money. And the fact is, though, it is expensive, and there's very few people that have, infinite amounts of cash. So it's kind of a nice thing to think about. But
totally. And I mean, I've been encouraged by conversations like this with other, like, entrepreneurs or business owners in this up and coming generation. And I think people are getting it. And I've talked to one of the owners of the local surveyor's office here, and he's looking for other ways of, like, can we make small projects at the, I can sell shares in projects that we're going to develop to my employees, to like just trying to think outside the box a little bit, setting up different investment vehicles, like you're saying, for the people that are working with you. Because I think for a while there was just this lack of hope, even for some of the people who are working a job, and seeing where they are and, like, how far that seems to be from home ownership, just to pick on the most obvious one, right? It's like, that's a big gap, and it ends up being such a big gap that you don't have hope about how you might bridge that gap, that you just start working that job, and just, you live for the odd vacation you take, but, like, I'm encouraged to see people being more realistic, more abundance mindset, more like, let's all grow this pie together. Let's find out how we can all be successful together. Let's not pretend that it's not important to make money and control our costs, and to pay attention to those like, where is the dollar going, and be relentless in our efforts and be clear in our vision. But, like, the goal of it now isn't about just enriching the top of a pyramid. It's about kind of helping that whole pyramid, maybe flatten the pyramid out a bit, and helping everybody at each level in the organization in a way that maybe they weren't given that attention previously in previous generations of business ownership. I think that probably spans a lot of industries, because, like I say, I have friends from, like, high school, college. We're all kind of getting to the age now where we're owning pieces of companies or are in senior positions at companies, and I can hear that there's a shift in that, right? That there's more of a social mindset while recognizing the capitalist context and trying to operate kind of in a nice way, recognizing both realities.
Yeah, we were talking about what you're like as an architect. There's very extremes. There's the really talented, renowned
Yeah.
architects that are gonna fight, to the death. They're gonna, live a life of poverty and die penniless, but they're gonna be remembered for their art and almost put on a pedestal for what they've created, and that's honorable. But if anybody is gonna there's not a lot of people that are going to really want to necessarily follow that path. And then there's the other side where you had mentioned that there's the any other architectural firms that are going to have 500 or so employees, and they're like very much on the other spectrum.
They still might do fantastic work. I think I'm probably ethically supposed to say all architects are good at their jobs just to protect the profession. But
yeah. I think
there's definitely standouts. There's definitely standouts, and I think in the penniless camp, like Louis Kahn comes to mind as like a classic example. He died at like on or so the legend goes, on a train station bench, unrecognized, and just like had a heart attack or something, and had no money to his name. That'd be like a penniless example, and then maybe on the other end, you have like Sir Norman Foster in the UK, who's like a deca-millionaire as a minimum, let's say.
Yeah.
I think in both cases, though, that those are both from an era of like they did fantastic work. They're both like the world's best in their own respects, and then they both relied on like cheap input labor, and this is a kind of a rotten core of architecture that is being fixed and is improving now. But a lot of who we think of as starchitects, like the big names that people who aren't in architecture would even recognize, those often have a lot of their success to thank, or have underpaid or absolutely unpaid employees to thank for their success, because there's just a sheer like brute force workload that has to happen to make good architecture happen, like on the design and detailing end of things, that if you hire people into the roles to do that work that are all 100,000 plus people, architectural fees would have to be like tens of times more than they are now. And we already live in a context where like everybody's undercutting each other on fees, trying to get the jobs. So, and I think that's the reality of both those examples. And I think now what we're seeing in the current context is in the U.S., where unpaid internships were like totally the norm. People are starting to unionize even in some of these big firms, just because they're so. It's so hard to live as this like kind of nothing ant at the bottom of the heap.
Yeah.
Canada's not as bad because we at least have minimum wages we have to pay as a minimum, which is hopefully all the firms are paying at least a minimum or living wages as a minimum, not minimum wages as a minimum at this point. But I think it is getting better, but there's a long way to go in advocating for an appropriate fee to do an appropriate job with qualified staff who deserve more than they have historically been getting, and fixing that problem from the bottom up, so that architecture is no longer about when it comes to financial benefit about only the top of any organization. It's about more of the organization. I think you'll see better work emerge from that environment. I think so. I think that's where we're headed, and it probably starts with recreating or rethinking some of what architectural education is like. It's a very intense environment. We kind of started the conversation a little bit talking about that, or you kind of alluded to it. It's unique. It's like full of surprises from what people might expect it to be, and expectations versus reality is going to be different for a lot of people. Architecture is, I think, is perceived as a hesitate to use the word sexy, but sexy profession. Like it's
a sexy profession.
Right?
Yeah, if you go
on
and
TV,
you have architect on your on your business card or your email thread, you're like, yeah, he's probably a little smarter than I am. He's got some going on there.
There is some cachet there for sure.
But That's why you go to school for 12 years, so you can put
Yeah,
architect on your
not quite
on your
12.
business card.
Well, if you could kick around for 12 at least, I think.
Yeah,
But
well, but I like it's a very notoriously difficult educational process
for
from
sure,
what I understand.
from workload, especially, like I'm not going to sit here and say that architecture is somehow the most difficult profession in the academic context. It's difficult, but more so from an effort perspective, less so from um, like a doctor is going to be memorizing endless things, and like the amount of information they have to hold in their brain is going to surpass a architect by a long shot. But it's like the workload in architecture school is intense. So when we go through architecture school, you usually have like all different subject matter courses that you're engaging in, like, because our profession is one of being a generalist, basically, like trying to know a little bit about everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then the core of architectural education is a studio setting where you're doing design projects that soak up every last waking minute of your time during any given semester. And that process is intense, partly because you have regular um, like reviews with faculty, but then it culminates in presentations to like experts flown in from around the world to interrogate you basically about your work. Why did you do what you did? Why didn't you do something else? How does this fit in amongst how people are currently thinking and writing about architecture in academia? How does it relate to what's happened in the past, and what does it say about the future? Like asking you deep questions
Mm-hmm.
about your work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not enough to just kind of like get to those presentations with a project that you've crafted and created. You're surrounded by your peers who you're kind of competing against in a way. And so what happens is, whether or not the school establishes minimum deliverables, it's kind of irrelevant for those presentations, because you're always looking next to you and like, well, that person they didn't sleep last night and they spent that extra 12 hours on this model or on this drawing, or read another book that I didn't have time to read, because they're just here doing more. So you there's a combination of relentless work ethic and undying and unsatiable perfectionism in the student body that creates that intense environment that maybe people have heard about in architecture school. And I thrived on it, to be perfectly
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, yeah,
It was fantastic. The best time of my life was architecture school, after getting married and having a child.
yeah. Of course, of course. Throw that out
Shout
there.
out
Shout out.
Bailey.
Yeah.
And then so that, like, that environment, you can imagine, doesn't while it might prepare you for the working world in giving you tools to be a hard worker, if especially maybe if you haven't worked a job before that, you'll be forced to put in effort. It doesn't give you the skill set to identify. It doesn't give you a good time management set of skills, but it doesn't help you identify, well, what has to happen in order to get to, like, profitably get to an end point. Because and this is bringing it back to your question about the kind of penniless architect versus and the rich architect. It's the reason that both of them are kind of not able to pay their people enough usually, and again, it's changing, is that perfectionism, right? And it's that now you're on a world stage, your work is going to be published, everybody's looking at you, and it could always be a little better. So you could always ask those 10 interns to stay through another night, try another version of something, model another building, and come and talk about it again in the morning, and then throw that out and try again and keep doing that. But that's a hard thing to do while paying for those people's time at a like reasonable rate, except for maybe a select few firms that somehow can command fees that you wouldn't even believe. Like, I don't know if you were following the Vancouver Art Gallery saga at all, but
Not too much, but open me up. Yeah, I don't know too much about it.
I don't know when it started. I think maybe I'm going to get it wrong, but I'll throw out a date, like probably 2016 or 2018 or something like that. They announced they're going to do a new location, and they hired I'm gonna refer to them as the world's best firm, but there's maybe 5 names in that tier to do the design of the new Vancouver Art Gallery. And what, like, I think they ended up firing them recently, and now are kind of putting a call out to Canadian firms. But this is a firm from Switzerland, Herzog and de Meuron, who have, if you look their work up, you'll be blown away. Like everything is perfect. But their architectural fees, just getting to the point where the Vancouver Art Gallery realized that, wow, we're never going to be able to value engineer this anywhere near our budget, that we, even an extended budget, I think they spent like $3 million getting of architectural fees, getting to the point of realizing this is going to be an expensive building, too expensive, and there's no fixing it. We need to start over. So it's cheaper for them to like stop paying fees at that rate and go to a Canadian firm and do a different building than it was to carry on. But that gives you a sense, like at that level, when you're doing work in a way that I would think of as like near perfect work, the type of fees that are necessary to do work like that is not something that like even institutions kind of like hardly afford that. So that's the challenge we're up against, because I think the expectation is you're an architect, everything you do should be amazing. And sometimes, and that is the goal, obviously, right? To do amazing work. But then the interesting challenge from my perspective is finding a way to do good work with good materials, good details that you can be proud of, that will make your community better, that you can charge a fee for, that can make your company, keep your company profitable, that you can pay your people so that they want to come to work, and be okay with that and be content with that level of work. And because I think that's the kind of realistic goal for a lot of small firms like myself who don't have, I have big, hairy, audacious goals, but they're not to become like some kind of globally recognized name. Like that just doesn't do it for me. I know that the path to get there it's a possible path, but it's not one I want to take.
Mm-hmm.
It's I've talked to people who that is their goal. Like that's just what they do. They just know things from day one. Like not gonna have kids. I'm never gonna retire. I'm gonna put work before everything in my life, before fitness, health, doesn't matter. None of that matters. Like it's architecture. And there is something admirable in that, but that's not a choice for me that I wanted to make. Like for me, those other things I just described, like buildings I can be proud of, that somehow make the world a better place. And there's enough to solve in that equation to keep me interested. Like, operating in this lower mainland context where land values are quite high. And of course they could go higher, but they're already quite high. And I think just getting good architecture out of an equation that starts with a high land input cost is an immense challenge that I am totally fascinated by, because I think if you kind of pull any given project that's been completed recently from around the lower mainland, you often see something that was either it's kind of crappy because the land was expensive, so their solution to the problem was, well, let's build as cheaply as possible so that we can try to preserve our margin on the other end. Or people who are like, well, land's expensive. We know we're going to have to sell whatever we create, if it's a public or a private project, let's say, for a high price tag, regardless of what we do with the construction of it. So let's make sure it's luxury. And then you kind of have these, it's oversimplification, but you've got crappy construction or like elite luxury construction. And there's something in the middle that I want to explore, because yes, the elite luxury construction is super cool. And that is where the global recognition, the publications lives, but it's also serving, I think I'm too humble for it, honestly. Like that's a weird brag, but no, it's like
a great brag.
It's a great brag. Like, when we're talking about like making the world a better place, it's like, I would never want to say I turned down like a tech executive's like sweet home that's like, $20 million just for their pool house. Like amazing. But like, I wouldn't want that to be the core of my work, because it's for such a select tiny slice of people, and like the world that you're making better in that scenario is, yes, you're contributing to art and architecture and like the body of work that exists. And yes, you're making somebody who's worked really hard a great place to live. So there's still merit in that, but like there's something that's less difficult about that than finding a way to do that good work at like reasonable budgets and be be able to kind of step back and see these projects emerge in a way that you can be proud of after they've been like stabbed by like value engineering exercises, planning departments, regulations, whatever. Like there's a gauntlet to run on every project as it is. So I think, finding that place between the projects that were crappy construction and totally elite, high-end luxury, somewhere there is kind of where we try to live at Buro47. And it's an evolution, but like I think we're mostly successful and improving with each step.
Yeah, I mean, improving each step is a huge thing. I mean, every day I wake up and I have a routine, and I reflect on as I'm walking, and I reflect on the day's events from yesterday, and ask myself, all right, how can I be better today? Even just 1% better. What is a decision that I made yesterday? And I kind of replay that. So, like at the end of the day, it's like flat out. I'm home. It's kid duties. It's on. There's very little time to decompress. So I decompress in the morning a little bit, and I reflect on the day that was, the conversations that I've had, the emails that were sent back and forth, and ask, could I have done better, and what would I do differently today, and try and just get better and better every single day in all aspects of life. But what you had mentioned is, solving a problem for a very, very small portion of people, or trying to solve a problem for a larger group of people, is admirable in its own right, because there's a lot of, we talk about home ownership because, housing here in Canada has been a hot topic for a number of years, especially, with the last 2-3 years, as we saw prices going up, we saw inflation going up, we see, new potential elected leaders coming into play. Housing, all municipalities have redeveloped their zoning regulations and community plan to allow for more housing and more density, because everyone is seeing a need for more housing and more building. But it's still, despite all of the efforts, and there's a big push, but still there are an immense amount of challenges that whether it's builders come up against, whether it's consumers to purchase homes, to build homes, to renovate their homes, to add suites, to do whatever it needs to be do, or on the design aspect, to to design something that's going to fit into a landscape that somebody is also going to be able to afford, because a lot of that, you said, land costs are expensive. And as we're doing some development projects up in the Okanagan of our own, but speaking with other, local banks here and developers, they need to, at a minimum, if they're looking at getting some sort of financial backing from a fairly, A-rated institution without having to go to, C lenders and pay a huge interest rate, they want to see a pro forma that has a minimum of a 30% margin before they're going to be doing that. So as a developer, if you're building homes, or you're building towers, or, whatever that may be, you have to have a minimum amount of profit into that project before you'll even get financed. And that makes people outraged, because the cost of land, one, is expensive. Two, cost of construction is, always becoming more and more expensive. And so people feel that because they're spending, a certain amount of money, which to them is way more money than the project is worth. But that's kind of the minimum that the developers are going to have to charge.
Yeah, people miss this connection all the time, right? With the finance, like the financial backing of projects, and what that does to projects. And I've talked to lots of developers on like, I'm always trying to soak up whatever tidbit I can from their side of things, because maybe we can talk about that in a minute. But like, there is an aspect to development that I think our company's also interested in getting into. I'd be interested to hear your stories as well. But having to show the 30% profit on your pro forma. Yeah. Now that's usually, the newer you are, the more likely your banks are going to be sticking to that. Like from what I hear, as you've completed successful projects, that number comes down and you can have tighter margins shown on your pro forma, because that 30% realistically, if let's say if it's your first project, if you're seeing that on your pro forma, it's going to be 15 when you get to the end of the project, because of things you just don't know that you don't know. And even when it's kind of vetted by like quantity surveyors and the bank and appraisers and everything, there's still hidden landmines you just can't be aware of yet. The other thing though, I'm thinking I've kind of thought about or wondered about maybe with that 30% pro forma, like having to show it, there's a difference between at the start of your financing having to show that your project can make 30% and actually being forced to make 30%. And so I've always in the back of my mind when I'm hearing that from developers on like, yeah, like, well, what can you do? You're forced to make well, not really. Like if you actually, I think what happens is people build a project and then often sell it at the maximum price the market will bear. And maybe that gets them 15%, maybe 30, sometimes more. And it's less about them having a target profit margin that they're trying to make and being happy with that. So yeah, I'm a little bit of two minds on that 30% financial pro forma thing. Like, yes, it's required to get started in the development world to be able to demonstrate that you could make 30%. But when it comes time for you to actually see what you're going to make by selling that product, you're making the choice where you're going to list this at. How are you making that choice? Are you looking at all your costs getting to this point and then being like, you know what, I want to be trying to make a dent in affordability. I'm just going to make 20% on this project, and then selling, maybe that ends up being a little under the market price. No, most people, the answer is going to be no, right? And I don't fault people for trying to make money, but they're going to go to wherever the market is usually. And I mean, this is the same rationale that we hear from the municipalities when they keep tacking on more fees. Mm-hmm. We keep saying like, hey, can we think about affordability? And they say the same thing, like, well, it doesn't matter what we tack on for fees because the market will just bear what the market will bear. But then I don't buy into that entirely, because yes, the market can soften, slow down and things. But if we look around the world, like you go to Hong Kong, just shows us that there's more runway here for prices to appreciate. It's not like there's some kind of static top of the market thing that will, or growing 1% per year or something.
Yeah, when we talk,
it's not a law of nature, right?
Worldwide,
totally. And I think that we are living in that twilight zone in Canada and the United States to some extent. They're a little bit more affordable than us for sure, but on affordability, where the reason it's such a desperate moment and that we're trying so many things, I think, is because there still is a possibility that people can buy. Like once you leave that behind entirely, like we have, even though people talk about how like there's whole generations that are writing off home ownership, I don't actually believe it yet. Like people still are clinging to that. You know what? I think there's probably a way for me. Maybe the rest of my peers aren't going to quite make it, but I bet you I'll make it.
Yeah.
And so while we're in that twilight zone where it's expensive, but still you can still find ways to get into home ownership, that this is where we're like all the different levels of government, different professionals, different like people coming together to try to think about like different ways of approaching the problem. And I think it's a really great and interesting place to enter the equation from a development perspective, especially on like small scale development, the kinds of things that I really hope our company finds a way to get into. And like if you were to say, Jeremy, what's your 5-year vivid vision, it very much have to do with finding ways to be the person making the decision about what does or doesn't happen on small development sites, instead of designing things and deferring those decisions to somebody whose bottom line is only cost and not design and not livability and not, or maybe it is those things in so far as it helps them sell a product. And I'm excited about a future that we can still find time in that twilight zone to be an agent that's operating in that arena and bringing projects to the public that they didn't imagine they could maybe afford, and find a way to do that. I think it's exciting. It's interesting. I mean, I've talked to tons of people about this, and everybody seems to be like, if there's a way and you can figure it out, please try it. So Uh,
But it's
yeah,
also like it's also not up necessarily up to just the design of the architect or how inexpensive can we build these homes, because that's how inexpensive can we build these homes is often a race to the bottom, because it's not, because you have, at this point, you have people that are either, whether you're prefabbing homes, you're manufacturing, you're working in a warehouse somewhere, or you have guys in the field that are out there that are building. Like, all those people still need to make a minimum wage. And if you're a company that is running, you have overhead costs, and so you need to be able to charge those. And at the end of the day, you still need to make profit as a
and
company.
land is still expensive. So even
And
the
land is
cheapest
still
build is
expensive.
still going to be at a kind of a
This is one of the
costly, even if you didn't care about selling something right at the top of the market and you try to build it as cheaply as you can, still going to be a valuable asset that you've created that will be expensive, just by nature of the land costs. And I'm cutting you off, but sorry.
Yeah, no,
But
please, please.
I think one thing that we were surprised by, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, but you mentioned all the zoning and official community plan regulation updates that have been happening, trying to find affordability, basically, or ostensibly. One thing with all of these like up, district-wide upzonings or up designations that happened instantly overnight almost was it pushed land prices up because, and I mean, it makes sense, but prior to a lot of that upzoning, what the world we were used to operating in is, you find a piece of property that, or your client does, or whomever, that has some hidden potential, some latent potential that you, through your efforts in design and planning, can help them unlock some value that the seller, when selling that parcel, wasn't thinking about. But once you upzone everything, and you've kind of you've changed where the floor is on the property sale prices. So we're quickly seeing that people who have held land can take advantage of these designations to get projects approved more simply. And maybe there's a bit of an affordability bump that's happening with some of those. But new entrants to the market, people trying to acquire new properties, they have a tougher time now in these areas because not only are sellers expecting more because they know that the highest and best use of their property is more than they thought before, but municipalities, given that they've just updated these regulations, are a lot more apprehensive about granting anything in excess of them because, like, look, we just went through a tough process, went to the community, had a lot of anxiety in the community approving these new designations. We can't go beyond. Like, we have to accept that this was some hard work and thoughtful work that went into getting these designations figured out, and now let's play with those regulations. So yeah, ironically, some of that stuff has hurt affordability a little bit, and at least in the short term, until and I think we saw like some development activity sort of slowing, actually, even though all of that certainty got kind of handed to developers and all of those higher densities got handed to landowners. Those two facts didn't actually result in a lot of shovels going into the ground because it didn't quite do it. And I mean, it's a very strange, maybe unexpected consequence.
The
Decision's not economic on the other end.
Totally. And like, one of the things that I talked to so many people about this, and I went to, there was, like, here locally, there were a number of different community of information sessions that were going on, and I attended a lot of them.
Yeah,
just
same.
to hear what was going on, talk to the public, see what they're there for, just kind of ears to the ground, see what people were interested in doing. And like, a lot of the feedback, a lot of the fear was like, oh, the community plan is changing all of a sudden. Now everybody is going to be building on their property. It is going to just be mayhem. It is going to be everybody is going to be building. Everybody's neighbor is going to be building these monstrosity units, 4 units, 6 units, duplexes, hacking it up. And there was this chaos that, like, oh, our neighborhoods are going to be changing at an immense pace, and just none of that has happened. It, like, when that's what I was trying to explain to people.
Should have, like, to say fix the problem we're trying to fix, you can't have no change and fix the problem. But yeah, the uptake was much slower than we expected, I think, on some of this.
And a lot of that, to your point, is people that were sitting on property that all of a sudden had a property that
Right.
could be developed. They're trying to leverage that. They can. It's not so common that it's sort of as a Goldilocks zone. If you're that's going to be this Goldilocks time of life customer, that is homeowner, that is going to be sitting on a property, that is going to want to develop their property, and is going to want to hire an architect and a builder that is going to, take their existing home and maybe knock it down or build a detached suite or a duplex or fourplex on that for them, where they're going to live in it, rent out the rest of it. And, it's usually going to be an older couple that's looking for some sort of retirement plan that has a lot of equity in the home already. But if your plan is to, all right, I know that my property is worth much more now than it was before, because, like you said, highest and best use of that property is now to put 6 units on it or 4 units, then that must be really desirable for somebody to come and purchase. So I'm going to get as much money as I can for that, and I'm going to list it as high as I can, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to move out of town and let developer
Which we would probably all do, right? Like I don't fault people for it.
Which
I think
we all would do.
Yeah.
But like the struggle with that is now is somebody that's going to be purchasing that property
totally
has a huge cost to pay for that land, and when they're getting a development project up off the ground, in a lot of cases they're carrying all architectural fees, design fees, everything, all out of pocket to a point where the banks will then start injecting any sort of capital to see that see that built.
We've done a bunch of financial modeling for clients all around the Lower Mainland, and unthankfully, every municipality has kind of treated this multiplex thing differently and missing middle differently. We'll edit that out. But the situation is a little different everywhere, but it's pretty common that, except for a couple municipalities, that when we're talking the 4 or 6 units per previously single family property, that isn't a financially interesting thing to almost anybody. The people where it seems to work is people who maybe they want to bring some more family of their own family onto a property that they're going to stay on, and they have to deal with some inconvenience and headaches for sure, because there's getting a bit of displacement from your site coming back to your home. But as like a speculative vehicle, it's not a great one, because very few municipalities are supporting creative stratifications of things. So a lot of what we see is if you want to take what was a single titled property and create more homes on it, at best, maybe you can do have 2 titles that you can sell later. So some version of a duplex with suites, some version of a duplex with a detached duplex behind it, something like that. But as soon as you try to create houseplexes or multiplexes or get creative and get compact units nested together, it just falls apart, because you have that high land cost. You build something that's large for all intents and purposes, because you've got 6 homes in it, maybe, let's say. And then if you're forced, I guess, to sell that as a single real estate entity, well, now you're looking for somebody to buy that who wants to be a landlord, maybe they want to live in one of the homes or not, but that's such a small pool of people. And because that 6 unit or 4 unit thing that you might be selling them is a brand new build too, it's not cheap. It's not easy to recover those costs in, like, the cap rate's got to be brutal. Like it's not happening as much, I think, because of this. Like that Goldilocks zone that you're talking about is minuscule.
Yeah.
And I want to push some municipalities with their own company on demonstrating, like, I don't know, be the guinea pig, show some test cases of, like, no, we should be okay stratifying these things. We should be okay letting people buy a studio suite on the ground floor of this home. Like, other places around the world do this. It's fine. Like, I mean, I studied at University of Toronto, worked in Toronto for a while. There's up and down the blocks, there's like old Victorian houses that get chopped up into like 6, 8, whatever homes. Yeah, a lot of times they're rented, but they are, as a municipality, embracing more options of selling off different pieces as well. I think Vancouver's doing more than a lot of the Lower Mainland as well. Burnaby's doing a pretty good job too,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, that's why I think there's not a lot of it
The
happening.
other thing is like you're also limited to a demographic that's going to be interested in doing that and accept that as their new way of living, and they're still going to be spending a
Right.
lot of money. So what I mean with that is like if you're Vancouver, if you're in a very transit friendly, transit oriented community where you're going to be able to bike to work, or you have close access to SkyTrain and buses and food and beverage and hospital and all that sort of stuff, that's cool. Like you can live in a much smaller area with many more people. That becomes a much more normal thing. But when you move out to the suburbs, or when most people move 30 minutes out of the downtown core, they move out there because they usually want more space. They want something a little quieter. They want a yard for their family and their dogs and whatever else.
And that 30 minutes that you're talking about is like, you say that and I hear 30 minutes in my car. But I know full well that if you would jump on public transit, that's probably 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think until that flips, right, until you're in a location where the public transit option is more convenient than the car option, the type of development that you would do is going to be very different, right? And has to be a little bit car oriented, unfortunately. And yeah, makes people interested in fewer types of things
So if
buy.
you're going, the local town center here, right? If you're going even 10 minutes outside of that town center, and you're putting in small little, like something that's just outside of really walkable, then you need places to park. You need a vehicle. You need a car, especially if you're
Totally.
a younger person that's zipping around, or an older person that just needs to pick up groceries, because it's inconvenient. Unless you're within walking distance, then you need a place to park, and you need you typically want your own laundry area. You don't want it to be shared laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to building these things, also you have to be selling it to a market that is going to want it, and want to accept it, and in fact embrace it. And I don't think, if you're outside of the downtown core by too far, you're just not going to get that kind of market. So even though you're saying, yes, technically you can build these types of things, if you as the developer, if you're developing at one of these single properties, if you're putting a huge amount of money into doing this and developing it, you want to make sure that you have somebody at the end that's going to buy it, because nobody's going to be building out of the goodness of their heart, or a very rare person is going to be building out of the goodness of their heart.
We also haven't tested it, though. I think, given it a fair chance locally, if you do try selling small homes with one parking space, no parking spaces, and they are even a little bit outside of the core, would they sell? Because we don't actually, like, this is what you're saying is totally the conventional thinking. I think like that makes sense to me, makes sense to you, but we don't have a good test. Like, we don't have data of an alternative. Like, we know the reality we live in now. But I mean, I still suspect you're right. And I think I work with somebody who, she lives here in town as well. Exactly the kind of scenario you're describing, about 10, 15 minutes by walking out of the town center, in a 1 bedroom, brand new, but 1 bedroom suite on a single family property. And she's looking to find somewhere else, right? Like, she hasn't made it a full year.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like everything's just a little bit harder than it should be. She doesn't have a car, and she's like just like trying to put that off, because that's a huge expense to bring into your life. And so she's got an e-bike, she's got other, like, obviously she can, well, I mean, not obvious, she can walk and run, but then that transit's not there for her. It's more remote than it needs to. It feels more remote than it needs to, and so we have a lot of work to do on unpopular things, unfortunately, like bike lanes. And we need to try to convince TransLink for the listeners in Australia, that's our local public transportation authority, to invest dollars here somewhere where we are in a very suburban location, but yet so close to the downtown heart of Vancouver, even if you think about it, right? But they're always looking for that population jump, I think, before they're going to invest the money. They're not going to be building the field of dreams and then people are going to come. They're trying to do it in the opposite way. And I think the story I shared of my colleague, like, if there was transit that was frequent and was serving the outlying areas, she would be eager to stay there, and other people like her would also, there would be that market that would emerge, I think, like you're getting at, and that would unlock some more, or take the risk off the table for some people who are thinking about trying smaller suites in different locations. But we live in a funny town where you've got pretty contained town centers and then like single family houses so close that I still feel like there's got to be some properties that are within spitting distance.
And this is so many areas around the world where you're not like very downtown, metropolitan core. This is a challenge for so many people. When it previously, I think it was 2021, went over up to Powell River. I think it was Powell River, went up there and flew into Powell River, was looking at a couple of homes up there just as investment properties because they were like $300,000. And the conversations that we were having with the locals there were like, this is bananas. We've never seen real estate prices this high. Us locals, like, we don't know what to do next. Like, we're getting pushed out. We don't have an opportunity to buy a house. And there's that fear there. And we're a lot of people are saying the same thing over here in our area, but we're looking at $300,000 thinking like, let's go get a couple of those things.
Yeah. There's always somebody here like thinking, whether they're from here or somewhere else, that's like, hey, that's actually not a bad deal. Like, can you imagine a single family detached home on a decent property and it's under $2 million? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny.
There's you mentioned trans, like, and that's the thing. So any major, and I maybe I shouldn't blanket statement because I don't know enough, so I'm making a total assumption. But in the case of developing in the area that we are outside of Vancouver and so many other municipalities that are facing the same challenge, transit and infrastructure, you're right, is not going to be put in place. Like, we're 47th on the list of priorities as far as like where they would start
That's
injecting in
overestimation of our status with trans. Like, I was on there was like a climate action committee locally, and TransLink came, this is now maybe like 3-4 years ago, to present their 2050 vision for the Lower Mainland. And they were talking about, in that kind of like squint into the future, far off thinking, they're talking about like which train lines they would extend, where are they going to add bus services, what are they thinking with autonomous vehicles and travel pods, and South Delta is like on the bottom of that map, and nothing. It's like they said between then, so let's call it like 2022 or something, and 2050, the change they expected to see in South Delta was an increase in frequency on some of the bus routes. Yeah. Right. So until
we'll just run the same buses a couple more times a day. Exactly. That'll be good.
I mean, we're in a tough spot with that. I think we have to show them that we're serious about like building more homes for people, because as much as people don't want to hear it, who are comfortable with and really enjoy the community that they see now, South Delta, or Delta and specifically South Delta even, has not kept pace with the growth of the Lower Mainland. We're the only municipality that in one of I think it was the 2016 census year, they showed a net population decline. Everywhere else is growing. Now we're growing, like that decline stopped and reversed, and we're growing, but we haven't built homes for people to invite more neighbors to our community at the rate that any other Lower Mainland municipality has. So it's no surprise, I think, that when it comes to transit, it's like there's some skepticism on the part of the people spending large infrastructure dollars on that region south of the Fraser River. If we spend the money, are they actually going to embrace change? Are they going to take it? They'll probably love having this train to get them downtown more easily, but are they going to approve the development projects that put the density of passengers on that thing to make the operation of it viable? Because they just haven't seen evidence of
Well,
the contrary.
they're looking for proof of market before government spending is going to put infrastructure into anywhere. They want the private market to prove that they're almost like they're worthy of their spending first. And what I mean by that is like, all right, well, how many people how many people need to wait in a tunnel lineup to get through before they're like, yeah, you know what, we should invest in a bridge, right? How many new homes, or in this case, there's conversations, towers, uh, need to be built? How many new homes need to be put in place before the government or any sort of infrastructure and spending outside of private money needs to be in place before they're willing to help support that and make that a priority. So they're looking to the private market first to invest their own money, and if that proves to be somewhat viable and somewhat of a success, then they'll say, all right, let's maybe make that a priority.
Yeah, I think it'll happen. Like, I bet that before 2050, we'll see more improvements than they're kind of laying out in these plans. But yeah, we have to play our part in convincing them that it's worthwhile. And change and development and densification doesn't have to be done in a way that ruins any community, right? It could make the community better and then attract infrastructure spending that just like sends it to the next level. That doesn't mean that I imagine South Delta becoming the next Vancouver. Like, no, definitely that's far off, right? But it could. There are. I think it's naive to think that, hey, this is the best it'll ever be. Let's like lock it down and stick it under glass, and hopefully it doesn't depreciate too quickly, or degrade too quickly. So I'm optimistic that we've got some great staff at the city right now. We've got good counselors. We've got a province that's pretty favorable. It seems like federally, whoever gets elected is obviously aware of the housing challenges there are, and will continue to help things along. I'm optimistic that this town and the other towns we're working in are going to benefit from this kind of ubiquitous intent to improve housing and housing affordability in the province, right? So yeah, I think it's a good place for people like you and me to be, because there is work to be done and it's cool stuff to do, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, let's I hope you come back and do this again.
Yeah, like anytime, and probably you'd get sick of me because I could talk forever, but yeah, sure.
No, we have so much more, honestly, to continue to cover.
Sure, yeah.
And I think like we've only touched a little bit of probably what we could get into when it comes.
Well, we had that phone call where I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough to say, so I gave you a call, and I think what we talked about on that phone call, we might have covered 2%. So.
Yeah, like we dove into it. I was like, yeah, dude, I'm telling you, like 4 hours, 5 hours, we can go this stretch.
And I liked listening to you, and if you like listening to me, hey, that's all that matters. Maybe, you never know, there might be other people out there in the internet that get some value from it too, but I already feel like this is a smashing success, even if it doesn't get posted.
Hey, yeah, I love that. All right, my man, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks so much for coming out. Super insightful. Man, it's been awesome totally having these conversations with you, and there's so much more work. You're right, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We're very blessed to be in the position that we are to do something about it, and we have a responsibility to continue every day fighting that good fight and working towards being able to do something incredible.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Awesome. For all you listeners out there, really appreciate all of your time today. Thank you so much for showing up, tuning in, and until next time, rock and roll.
Peace out.